What happens now? You'll get over heartache. You'll get over heartache. You'll get over heartache. Carry on, don't feel.
Good evening, St. Lucia. Welcome to another episode of What's Happening Now with Laura. You know, after last week's episode, I've had many causes for pause. I've had many of you call me to discuss certain things. And while I'm not able to go through all of the things that we discussed, some of them really piqued my interest. And one topic in particular, which I did not talk about last week, but which I intended to revisit, to go over, stuck with me. And so we'll be talking a little bit about those things this evening. As I said, one topic in particular really piqued my curiosity, really astounded me, really. I did not talk about it last week, as I said, because something about it just did not sit well with me. And I wanted to go over what I had heard. And I am so very glad that I did, that I waited, and that more information has come forth in that case that really wants me to spend a little bit more time on it. And I am as astounded, if not more so, than I was last week. But I think if we do not start discussing it, the discourse does not begin, I fear that it will be one of those things that's just swept under the rug, and everybody will just let it go, and nobody will really pay attention to it, because after all, the person in this narrative does not have a squeaky clean background like, say, a Botham Jean. So we don't really want to deal with it. You know, we don't really want to deal with people who have been misused, abused, maltreated, ill-treated, you know, really treated like animals if they don't have a halo over their head, if they're not a saint, if they're not so squeaky clean, as I would say. But before we go into that, I really want to know, and I wanted to tease you a little bit about it. What is it about attractive people that make us, and I say us, and because I include myself in it, all of us, we have this tendency to be more lenient or to lose perspective, and even want to be, as I said, lenient on persons who have committed heinous and vile acts of inhumane proportions. What is it about us that makes us want to forgive attractive people who are easy on the eyes, as opposed to people who are not so easy on the eye, or, you know, with a little blemish in their background, a little carbuncle here or there. Never mind that some of us have it worse and it's just hidden. It's on our backsides. I mean, not on our buttocks necessarily, but on our backsides, where nobody's seeing because we're covered, on our inner thigh, or a place that is not easily accessible to the public. What is it about them that makes us so easy to want to forgive them and to hug them and forget that they've committed an act so heinous and brutal and really unfair, that we forget there's an actual victim here and want to compliment them on something. Last week I touched on a little bit on the Botham Jean trial and the Amber Guyger situation, and how a lot of people were divided on whether Brant Jean did the right thing by forgiving Amber Guyger and by not even wanting her to go to prison, and the judge also simming, not simming, but being emotional and getting off of her place and coming down to Amber and hugging her and giving her Bible and spending copious amounts of time talking to her, reading her scriptures and all of that. And I did say then that I can understand, I can empathize. I don't know that I would do the same as Branch Jean, but I can totally empathize with him. I can understand where he's coming from, because as I said then, the whole trial was about how much a saint-like Botham Jean was. And I cannot help but agreeing with Bran. I didn't know Botham at all, but I can't help but agreeing with him that perhaps the Christian person that he was touted to be would want to forgive Amber and would want her to walk down, that straight and narrow and to convert to Christianity. I can't help but think that perhaps this is what he would have wanted, considering how he was painted on both sides, because one side painted him to be a saint and the other side tried to tarnish that reputation, that image. Of course, you can only want to do that if you think a person who seems to be so good and so angelic would hurt your defense or would hurt your side. So you'd want to damage it. And, they talked about, him using weed and that they found weed in his apartment or whatever. But on the other hand, I was not so convinced that the judge did the right thing by coming down and seeming impartial towards Amber Guyger, because I believe that judges are supposed to, or not being impartial, but being partial rather, because I believe that judges are supposed to be seen as impartial. Like, you're not supposed to, there's a clear cut of guilty versus innocent, and you don't want to open that door and say, okay, well, I feel for you. I'm sorry that you're going through that. You committed an inhumane act, or you committed a crime against humanity, really. And so, but because you're cute and you cried and you show that you're remorseful, whether you really are or not, I don't know. I want to forgive you. And I thought that the judge in this case was out of order. She that wasn't her place. It wasn't her place to be that humane. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to, it seems awful, but I don't think it was her place. I think if the family wanted to forgive her, fine. If everybody else wanted to forgive her, fine. If she wanted to forgive her in the privacy of her thoughts, in the privacy of her home, in the privacy of Amber Guyger's jail cell, fair enough. But to be seen as being partial towards her, how are you going to be when you have another case similar or another heinous case comes your way? Are you going to want to, be as partial? Will you give every criminal a Bible and read them scripture and tell them, fix your life? Where does it end? Is my thing. And so that got me thinking. I thought about it and I said, I wonder how other judges feel. Anyway, for a moment, I was able to put it behind me and not think about it too much. And then I was watching a documentary, like the following day or something. And it's like, sometimes you do things and everything just skips aligning. So I was watching this Ted Bundy documentary. Ted Bundy was one of the worst serial killers out there ever. Was put to death by electric chair in 1989. I mean, this man literally bit off one of his victims' nipples. I mean, he was a terror while living this double life with his girlfriend and even getting this cult-like following even while he was on trial, and women were coming to court with their hair combed a certain way. It was just disgusting. But this guy was a slick talker, and he was a good look, easy on the eye. He was very, very attractive, very, very handsome. And then he was a student of the law, but he was very narcissistic and he was very arrogant. And so every time he would fire his lawyers and whatnot, so he ended up finally representing himself. But then he was found guilty. He was adjudged guilty. And in the documentary, the judge said something, and I was like, what? And the Amber Geiger case came back to mind, and I'm like, well, can I be that hard on Judge Tammy Camp if this? I for a minute I thought there was some creative license, so I went back and I looked for the actual tape of the judge actually giving his last words to Ted Bundy, and these are his exact words in his own voice. The last words that he said to Ted Bundy. What?
Right, young man. You made a good lawyer. I'd love to have you practice in front of me, but you went another way, partner. Take care of yourself. I don't have any animosity to you. I want you to know that. Take care of yourself.
Thank you.
Go to bed, Richard.
To that again, just so we can marinate and we can get what the judge said. I had to listen to this maybe about 62 times to really finally accept what the judge was saying. Let's take a listen again.
You're a bright young man. You made a good lawyer. I'd love to have you practice in front of me, but you went another way, partner. Take care of yourself. I don't have any animosity to you. I want you to know that. Take care of yourself.
Thank you.
Go to bed, Richard.
Sounded there as if the judge was disappointed. Like, wow, this young, bright mind has to go to jail. Wow, for the rest of his life. He has to be put to death. He has to go on death row. Like, you're a bright mind. And I feel no animal. How could you not feel any animosity towards this monster who had killed, bludgeoned? And one of these days we'll go through the monsters that lurk around us. And even Ted Bundy himself said that the monsters, criminals, they're not vampires with fangs and spittle dripping out of their jaws. They're not lurking in the alleys, the dark alleys. They're not strangers. They're right there. They're our brothers and sisters, our lovers, our husbands. You know? Even the man of the cloth. These are the monsters. And we forget that. We turn a blind eye, willful or otherwise, because they're good looking, because they're articulate, because they speak well, because they're learned, because they fit in so well in society. And here is this judge acknowledging that this guy bludgeoned several young women, cut them down in their prime, and one of his victims was a 12-year-old child. And then you're going to say that I hold no animosity towards you? That you're a brilliant young mind, brilliant mind? Not devious. Brilliant. Although, if I were to play a part of the, I think it was earlier or later earlier, I think, of this clip, it would say that it was shockingly wicked, vile, evil. But then immediately after he says that, he compliments him on his brilliant mind. Yes, he had a brilliant mind, damn it. He was able to get these women. And a lot of the women that he killed were after he had escaped from prison twice. That was after a much publicized trial was going on and he escaped, and he was able to do that. And these women just had blinkers on because there's this good-looking guy, you know, good-looking guy, very well spoken, well dressed, paying attention to me. So they, you know, and in another interview with a young woman, while attending his trial, was saying she can't believe that this guy did that. She doesn't want to believe that this guy did that, although the evidence is overwhelming that he did it. But she, you know, he's just so cute though. I'm like, what is it about attractive people that prevents us from seeing the evil that lurks within? What is it? I just don't get it. And so I come back to Judge Tammy and what she did. So let's take a look at this after the Amber Geiger case, what the judge did and how she approached Amber Geiger.
Like maybe she was reading a Bible scripture or witnessing somehow. I mean, it's just oh my God, now the judge is hugging Amber Geiger. Okay, this is, I'm starting to lose it again,
Well,
Judge.
and I think that the emotional aspects of this case, and again, without question, it's a tragedy all the way around. The emotional aspects of his case have led to the judge to do something that's very unusual, to have direct attempts to communicate with the family of the victim and the defendant herself on the record. And what I can only suppose is an attempt to try to start some healing for these people. It certainly is difficult. It certainly is extraordinary. It certainly is unusual.
And as we saw, we didn't have the audio of what the judge was saying to her, but she was quoting a scripture. And this went on about 5 minutes. Previous to that, there's a part previous to that when she came to her, and Geiger was still, before the hug, she was still sitting down, and she brought out the Bible, and she opened it up, and she read the scripture and showed her, and she's talking to her, she's counseling her, and she's, doing all of these things, and she hugs her, and then spends another, in the minds of all of us, and I'm going to stress Black lives, because I was at pains to find, and I'm not saying that there isn't, but I'm saying I was at pains to find any judge, black, white, brown, or yellow, being as compassionate and empathetic with a minority or a black criminal who had committed one or several murders. I was at pains to find one. I couldn't find one. Not saying that they don't exist, but I'm saying I couldn't find one. And they're spending all this time. So now all of these Black Americans who've been fighting the movement, Black Lives Matter, and almost every day it seems a Black person is killed by a white cop or a white person and gets away with it, whether it's on a self-defense or stand your ground or whatever convoluted argument that they come up with, and win and they get off scotch-free, and they, not even a blemish on their record, not even a suspension without pay, that they get. How do these people feel? It's one thing to have the surviving victims, and I say surviving victims because I always believe that when you kill somebody, there's not just one victim. There are the surviving victims, the families that are left behind to pick up the pieces, the friends, the communities from which these people come from who are left to pick up the pieces because that person is no longer there. And so it's one thing when the surviving victims say, okay, I forgive you, or a faction of that family says, I forgive you. I hold no ill will towards you. We're Christians and we're taught to believe that, and we believe it in our hearts and whatever. It's one thing. But it's another thing when it seems like the law is being partial towards white criminals because, and I could only figure it's because they're attractive, good-looking people. You know what I mean? That they're giving them all of this goodwill and saying, oh, you're a good person, I hold no animosity towards you, fix your life, take care of yourself, young man, take care of yourself, young woman, I hope you take this as a learning opportunity. First of all, Amber Geiger got not enough time for what she had done. 10 years with the possibility of parole after 5 years, that's not enough time. I don't care how Christian or liberal that you think you are, but the fact of the matter is you committed a crime, you killed somebody in their home, you did not use the training that you're supposed to have had, you did not do the things that you were trained to do, and you caused a person to lose their lives. Yeah. Maybe if after 10 years or even after the 5 years that comes up and you come up for parole or whatever, but to only get 10 years to start off with, that's nothing. Considering that there are people who get more years than that for maybe drug possession or, just because 3 strikes, you're out and you're in there for 20 years or even a lifetime because you've committed crimes. You killed somebody. That is the height of, it wasn't a self-defense act. It wasn't a case of defending my castle or anything like that. You were in the wrong place. There was at no time that you realized that you were in the wrong place. And even then, you're a cop. You're supposed to be trained differently to know, to assess situations. And this was the only way that you saw to deal with that. You know, I've just had a long day. You're in my house. You're not supposed to be there. I'm just going to kill you and get away with it and just be done with it. And then you're going to cry, oh my gosh, what have I done? What have I done? You should have had the presence of mind to know what to have done in the first place. But, you know, you be remorseful or whatever. But I have a problem with the judge now, or judges feeling that they can be bleeding hearts when it comes to these people. You've killed somebody, and I may feel sorry for you because maybe wrong place, wrong time, whatever, but it's not my place to come down, select who I'm going to be sympathetic towards. No, it's not your place. If that is the case, then you have to be that way throughout, regardless. But hey. And the other thing that I found that was very strange is we always seem to bring up, in the victim's case, issues that have nothing to do with the issue at hand. So Botham Jean was killed in his apartment, and then the police wanted to talk about they found weed. Or was it the weed that caused him to get shot? Is it that he was dealing dope and he came out brandishing and trying to protect himself or whatever? He came out brandishing, you know, an M16 or whatever? No, that has nothing to do with anything. So why you want to say, oh, well, he did weed? It's like Joshua Brown, you know, he was murdered. And then it's almost like as if people don't want him to get justice because guess what? He was allegedly dealing dope and it was a drug bust gone wrong. Well, guess what? Regardless of whether it was a drug bust gone wrong, he was murdered, and the people, the perpetrators, need to be brought to justice. So I don't understand, especially America always tends to do that. The Americans, they love to do that, especially when it involves black people. Well, you know, they're killing themselves, you know, they're killing each other anyway. So, you know, or he's dealing drugs, or he has a history of abuse. What does that have to do with the fact that that person was murdered? So is it that because I have, and nobody wants to look into the background as to why that person is dealing dope anyway, or why that person did whatever? It's just that you were an abusive person. There were numerous restraining orders against you. So yeah, you're a bad person. But what about if that person had been abused in the past? So we don't care about these things. We're just going to, you're a bad sort. You got what you deserved. But the murderer, the person who actually did it, oh, you're so cute. You know, I'm sorry, you're so brilliant. He's a wasted talent. And we're sorry that we have to put you behind bars. And we spare all that. When is the narrative going to be the same regardless of what skin color that the victim or even the perpetrators have? When are we going to show the same level of compassion and empathy for all the persons involved and not just the select few? Now, I've already spent too much time on this. We're going to take a quick break. But when we come back, there are a couple of other issues I want to deal with, but I'm not going to deal with them tonight. I changed my mind. I'm going to go straight into that other topic that I want to really sink my teeth into and for us to think for a moment, because it has happened right here in St. Lucia. Stay tuned. We'll see you on the other side of the break.
You'll get over heartache.
Thank you for coming back and joining us on What's Happening Now with Laura. Now I want to talk about an incident which occurred last week, that was brought to our attention last week, and that really gave me cause for pause. I'm going to read something to you. It's a news article that came out last week, and I want to take it from there. Authorities are investigating this week's physical assault of a female inmate by 3 male inmates at the Border Lake Correctional Facility, an official revealed Tuesday. The incident occurred on Monday, October 14th, just after 12 p.m. Director of Corrections Hillary Herman told the press briefing, normally male and female inmates are housed in separate units. So how did that happen? Herman said the incident occurred in the vicinity of the medical and female unit, which are adjoining units. He said both males and females have access to the medical unit. Herman explained very seldom male and female inmates are together. The exceptions are in classes, in church, those incidents, but normally they're not together. Now, the medical and female units are adjoining units. You would have both males and females having access to that facility. He said at some point, the assault occurred in that proximity. We have no further details, but it's important that we allow the public to know that this incident did took place, Herman said, who was days ago appointed director of the facility, his third such appointment. Herman expressed that this issue should never have happened, and the prison is now reviewing policies and procedures. Something obviously went wrong, and that's what we will have to decide upon completion of the investigation, he said. I know that procedures were not followed, so we have to look into why it was not followed and ensure that it doesn't happen again. Herman believes the prison has become complacent. I think there's a lot of revamping to do to go back to standard policies and procedures, and I think this incident really directs that needs to happen, he said. The assault comes a day after a 17-year-old girl, Michaela Sumer of Bruceville, Vieux-Fort, appeared in court for the offense of introducing a prohibited item into the prison. Police said last week Sumer smuggled a cell phone into the facility in an attempt to pass it on to an inmate, her brother. She was accompanied by her mother at the time. So I heard this news item and I was like, what? Physical assault? That the male and the... I said, but how did that... The first thing that came to my mind was, how did that happen? I thought the male inmates and the female inmates were housed separately, that they were not in contact with each other. And then my eyes further popped open when he said, well, the medical facility, which both males and females have access to, is adjoining the female unit. And I'm like, okay, why would you want to do that if you want to keep the males and the females separate? Why would you even have a situation where a common area is adjoining the female unit when you don't want the men to have access to the women? Anyway, that was the first of it. So I thought when they said physical assault that maybe these 3 guys, knowing what this 16-year-old girl was in there for, maybe the person that she had killed, and she's in there for murder. She killed someone. Her case hasn't been called. She's not gone to court, but she is there allegedly for murder. And so they knew her victim, and they wanted to, pass a love on her, and so they smacked her about a little bit and whatever. And so that's the physical assault. So I was a little bit concerned. I'm like, what? It's something about the story did not gel for me at the point of the physical assault, because at that point I thought the assault was smacking upside the head because maybe they knew her victim and he's not there to defend himself, he's dead, and she's there, so they're gonna teach her a lesson. Yeah, I thought that was it. I looked up the meaning of assault, and I'm gonna I'm going to share that with you so that you can have an idea as to why I was so flabbergasted the following week when more light was shed on this particular case. What is assault? While the exact definition of assault varies from state to state, from country to country, it is generally defined as an attempt to cause physical injury to someone, and in most jurisdictions includes making threats, as innocuous as making threats, or engaging in threatening behavior, causing the individual to fear bodily harm. The most essential element of assault is an act intended to cause bodily harm or intended to cause fear of bodily harm. For an act to be considered assault, it must be obvious. Threatening words are not enough to be considered assault unless they are combined with an ability or perceived ability of the perpetrator to make good on the threat. For example, a threat to cause harm combined with raising a fist or brandishing some sort of weapon is enough to cause fear of harm to the victim. This raises the threat to the level of assault. So, when you hear assault, this is the first thing that comes to your mind, that somebody threatened you and maybe they smacked you up about a little bit or whatever. But then it goes further. There are so many various forms of assault. There is simple assault versus aggravated assault. The laws of most countries or states classify acts of assault as either simple assault or aggravated assault. Which classification an assault falls under depends on the severity or injury or harm that is caused, or the harm that could have been caused if the perpetrator had followed through with his threat. Some states, some countries use a classification of degree system, a classification by degree system, recognizing different levels of assault, with first degree assault being the most serious and third degree least serious. So a simple assault is if somebody would say, you're so stupid, I could smack you upside the head, and then come with an open hand or whatever to smack that person. That person moves back and be like, oh my God, you're going. That's a simple assault. Aggravated assault, however, is a felony and may arise from an assault committed with a weapon, or an assault or threat of harm committed with the intent to commit a more serious crime, such as a rape. So there's simple assault and aggravated assault, which includes rape. So we were told, glossed over, that this inmate there was a physical assault on this female inmate. And I, for one, thought, okay, physical is more than a simple assault, like a threat or whatever. But I'm thinking maybe she got punched and whatever, which is aggravated assault. You using your fist as a weapon. You maybe got a piece of wood and you're smacking upside the head. That is aggravated assault. Never for once in my thinking did I think that it was rape. But we come to find out that she was not just assaulted. And I always complain about the fact that in St. Lucia, the rape culture is so inbred in us that we cannot muster the courage, the gonads to use the word rape. Even when it happens to us, even when it happens to a loved one, we cannot say the word rape. He proceeded to have sex with her against her will. It is rape. He had sex with a minor. It is statutory rape because a minor cannot consent. A baby cannot say no. Rape is rape is rape is rape, and we should not be sugarcoating rape, because when we do that, we allow for the situation to reoccur because we pretty it up. We take a pig that is all dirty and mucky and, you know, a cochon sauvage, and we take it and we clean it up and we scrub it up and we make it look pink and we put a little rosy cheek for it and a lipstick and we say, oh, voila, you know, it's still a pig. And it's still a cochon sauvage. So why are we so hesitant to use the word rape? This is the director of our Lone Correctional Facility hesitant to use the word rape. And that's not the only place, that's not the only time he got it wrong or he got it muddled or he sugarcoated it or whatever. As we will hear, you know, we will hear about the what the mother had to say or what the victim had to say about what happened to her, right? So we were told it was a rape. We were told it was an assault. You know, just gloss it over. It was an assault. Meanwhile, there are various types of assault, and as we talked about, aggravated assault, sexual assault can be an aggravated assault. And even then, we cannot even necessarily say sexual assault, because sexual assault could just mean touching erotically, just, you know, when, you know, touching a person inappropriately, that's sexual assault. But in this case, it went beyond inappropriate touching or inappropriate behavior. It went allegedly as far as rape by not just one person, not by two people, but by three men who were not supposed to have access to this young lady. So this is what we were told. We were told that it happened in the vicinity of 80. I don't even know how to, this is so ridiculous. It happened in the vicinity of the medical facility, which just so happened to be adjoining the female facility. And so we were led to believe that it happened in that common area, but it did not. From what we now understand, it happened in the young lady's cell. So of course, the director didn't directly lie, you know, whether it's deliberately or otherwise. He didn't directly lie. He said it happened in the vicinity of the medical facility, which just so happened to be adjoining the female ward. But it happened in the female ward, not in the vicinity. It happened in her cell, allegedly, from what the young lady is saying. It happened in her cell. When the mother wasn't even informed, somebody had to tell her about it. When the mother went to her daughter, just imagine, you have to visit your daughter who's 16 years old in prison. Hard pill to swallow. You have to visit her in prison. But now you have to visit her under these kinds of circumstances. And as soon as she sees you, she falls into your arms and says, Mommy, they raped me and made me feel like a dog. Now I know some of you, and I've heard some of the comments, you know, that you guys are making snide remarks. Oh, so the person that she killed him like a dog. Didn't it feel like you was killing him like a dog and whatever? Let's not muddy the waters too much. She's already in prison. She's been dealt with for the crime that she has committed. Does that mean that she's less human because she's in there, and that these felons, these male felons, have every right to slick their lust or exercise their control over her because she's in there for murder? What are they in there for? What makes it right for them to do that to her? The fact that she's killed someone? Just imagine if it were your 16-year-old daughter. First of all, I have a hard time understanding why she was even there at the prisons, although our laws in St. Lucia does give one, it does make you liable to be housed at bodily if you are 16 years and over and you've committed a crime, for you to be incarcerated at bodily. So that's our laws. You're 16 years and over, you are liable to be incarcerated at bodily. So that's the law, and so she's here. So I would have preferred for her at 16 years not to be there until after her trial, and we look at the scope of her behavior, and because sometimes I know that 14-year-olds have been tried like adults because of others, extenuating circumstances or whatever. But knowing that Bodley is at maximum capacity at 503, I think at last count, inmates, and that the new director has said that one of his priorities is to reduce on the number of remand inmates that are at Bodley, so that it's overcrowded. Why would you want to put a 16-year-old there? I'm not saying to give her special treatment, but why would you want to put a 16-year-old there? Does she have a criminal record? We don't know these things. Does she have a criminal record? Does she, does she have a history of running away from other places that she's been kept for incarceration or whatever? What is it there? And why was she not under supervision? How is it that these inmates had easy access to her? So she says, "Mommy, they raped me. They made me feel like a dog." That's not the worst of it. Director Herman said that the incident happened on Monday. The young lady said to her mother, the incident happened on Sunday evening, not Monday noon, but Sunday evening. So there's a whole 12 hours thereabout since this thing happened, and the director does not know. And we have to say he does not know because this is what he said. He was informed that the incident happened in the vicinity of the medical center and that it happened afternoon on Monday. Then that's not it. That's not all. So she was raped in her, she says she was raped in her cell, and she was raped the night before. And not only that, they allowed her to sleep in that cell. She was raped there. So just imagine somebody broke into your home and they raped you. And then the police tell you cannot leave. You have to sleep here. You have to sleep there. Remember those, not so long ago, there were 4 kids, 2 girls, 2 boys. The 2 girls allegedly, the 2 boys were allegedly forced to rape the 2 girls in the park, in the Derek Walcott Square. Can you imagine that they'd have to sleep there after the assault? They'd have to sleep there after the assault. Or anywhere that they would have to sleep there. Can you imagine that? If you cannot imagine it, why would you think that it's okay for a 16-year-old to be raped in her cell, to not be taken away from the scene of the crime? It's a crime scene, people. To be removed from the crime scene and housed somewhere else while the investigations are going on. No, the investigation is going on around her. While she's still there where they raped her. So psychologically, you're less than a human being. She said they made her feel like a dog. If it were me, I'd feel like a speck of dust under the vilest, under the hoof of the vilest animal out there. She was raped in her cell, so she says. I mean, we don't know because the investigation is not complete and we don't know what's the outcome going to be. But raped in her cell, left there overnight, and then to hear that rather than you being raped the Sunday, you were raped the Monday. Rather than being raped in your cell, you were raped outside of your cell. Oh, did I say raped outside of your cell? Assaulted in the vicinity of the medical facility, the medical center. Assaulted. Yeah, maybe just slapped around a bit at the medical center. How many lines of communication need to be broken at that point? Now, I really feel for the director because it was 3 days since he was appointed at his job. And this is the baptism. And yeah, this is his 3rd stint as being the director of Bodley, but I guess he must really like that job for him to be coming back. But 3 days after you take on the mantle, this is your baptism by fire. That you have a young girl incarcerated who is raped in her cell on a Sunday, and bless his heart, at least he called the press conference and talked about it. But almost everything that you say in the press conference was contradicted by the victim. Did you even speak with the victim, is what I want to know. Did you even speak with the victim? Whom did you speak with who gave you that information that you came out to the public with? Is it that they gave you the wrong information? Or is it that you didn't take the time to find out bare preliminaries before convening a press conference? Is it that it was too soon after taking on the job, you're still getting your feet wet and this happened, so you... But even then, I would think that you, knowing, being that it's the third time that you are in this position, that your best course of action would be to say, okay, yes, an incident did take place, but we're still sorting through the preliminaries and I really cannot speak to the issue at hand as yet, but I promise as soon as I get some more concrete information, I will let you know. Is that too hard to say? Why is it that it's so difficult for us to say, I don't know what happened, we're looking into it, and as soon as we get information, we'll come back to you? That calls to mind another incident. Remember the young woman who was murdered in her house, the wife of the cop, and then the chief of police calls a press conference and says, yeah, by 12 o'clock we'll have an answer for you. By the end of the day we'll have an answer for you. Not if 24 hours hadn't even elapsed. And he was already making all these pronouncements. And up to today, there is no judgment. There is no... a conclusion to this case is not even close at hand. Why do you think that this happens? 3 days in on a job, or 5 days, however many days it was, you're in on a job, this has happened, and you come out with information that is sketchy at best. Information that is contradicted by the victim. And you would have thought that the first thing you would do was to speak to the victim, to find out from the victim what happened to you. Juxtapose that against what the Pope say happened, or the correctional officers say happened. And one of these days, I'm going to have to really do a show on correctional officers at Bodley, because hello, I don't think we have correctional officers at Bodley. We have wardens, we have people who watch the prisoners, but I don't think they're... Because some of the judgments of these so-called correctional facility correctional officers leave a lot to be desired. It begs a lot of questions. How did you even become a correctional officer in the first place when your judgments, everyday judgments, is so faulty? But that's for another show. So again, my question is to Director Herman, did you even speak with the victim in this case before you called this press conference? Basic. We're due for another break. When we come back, the lines will be open and we'll further discuss this case, because this is not the first time a young woman has found herself in difficulty at Bodley. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You'll get over heartache.
Welcome back, and thank you for staying tuned to What's Happening Now with Laura. Now, I wanna read Director Herman's words here, as it pertains to when a reporter asked about the incident after the press conference. It says, right, so he says that the victim has given different versions of the event, so the investigation will determine what happened, what day the incident occurred, and how it happened. He confirmed that the victim did sleep in the same cell. Why? I don't know, because to my mind, if a ward has said that I was raped, the first thing that you would do is to remove them from the cell and to have them get that rape kit test done, right? But keep in mind, there's very few options here. She should not be in the prison at all. She's a juvenile, and we don't have a juvenile facility. We can't put her in any adult units. Anywhere else you put her would have actually exposed her to worse. So the choice was to make her stay there, but have company 24/7. What? Let me read that again. Anywhere else you put her would have actually exposed her to worse. So we're taking the list of the monsters, right? So would have exposed her to worse. So the choice was to make her stay here, but have company 24/7. And who is the company? We don't know. He never said. Who is the company? And why do you think that because she has company 24/7 that it makes it better? It's unfortunate. I lost $100. That's an unfortunate incident. So it's unfortunate that that's what we have to work with. I know that procedures were not followed. So now we have to look into why it was not followed and ensure that it does not happen again. I think we've become complacent. I think there's a lot of revamping to do to go back to standard policies and procedure. Was the young lady taken to the hospital and administered a rape kit? Was she taken to the hospital? Why is it that she could not have been left at the hospital with the same company for 24/7? You know what I mean? Okay, so she was raped at the facility. You don't have another place to put her. Why didn't you take her to the hospital, let her get do the rape test kit there, and then leave her there with that company for 24/7 to ensure that psychologically, mentally, she's stable? Because it's never an easy thing to have your privacy so violated that you're more than personal space. We have our very first call. Thank you. You're on the air.
Laura, I think you bias.
Tell me why.
Because
We lost that caller, but I'd really love the caller to call back and to tell me why I'm biased. I'd like to have that conversation with you, because I don't think I am, but that's just me. I am biased to what I think. So, So these are some of the issues that we want to know. Now, this is not the first time a young lady has found herself in a situation at Bodley. A few years ago, between 2015 and 2017, there was this other young lady at Bodley. Now, granted that she arrived at Bodley pregnant, but why would you put a pregnant 16, I think she was 16 at the time, 16-year-old at Bodley? She's already pregnant. So you bring her in there, which does not have the facilities for juvenile detention. So you bring her in there and she's pregnant to the point where she gives birth at Bodley. How is that a correctional facility? How putting a 16-year-old pregnant girl in jail, so much so that she delivers in jail and she's kept there with her baby, how is that correcting any wayward behavior or fixing, ameliorating anything? How? And on top of that, I don't even think it was for... We have another call. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
yes, Laura.
Yes, dear.
My question to you.
Mm-hmm.
My question to you is,
Yeah.
if a pregnant young lady commits a crime, okay, commit a serious crime, where would you like to house her? Do you have an alternative to put her?
We're talking
rather
about a
than
juvenile,
at the
right?
prison?
A 16-year-old,
Yeah, 16-year-old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're saying, you ask, repeat your question. You're saying, where
I'm
would you?
asking, where would you suggest to keep her while she's in custody rather than the prison?
Yeah, but that's not the point. That's not the point. The point is, the question you should be asking is, why don't we have a juvenile facility? Why are we putting young children in a facility with adults? Imagine, let me put this to you. We have adults, young adults, who are first-time offenders, and we have a difficulty with housing them with seasoned criminals. Why would we now take a child and put that child in that situation? The question to me should not be to me, where would I house the child? The question you should be asking is, why don't we have a juvenile facility to house these children? That's the bigger question here. Why don't we have a juvenile
That is
facility?
actually what I was coming to. What I'm saying is, instead of you blaming Human,
I'm not blaming her. No, sir. Do not put words in my mouth.
You should have been, to me,
Don't put words in my mouth.
Should have been a proper place.
If you listen,
but in the
if you listen to what I said, you would have heard me say, I feel for the man because it's 3 days on the job and this is your baptism by fire. This is what I said. So, okay, so go back to your question. You have them there. Why isn't it there a place that is secluded? Why is it that you have this child in a place that is frequented by men when the women and the men are supposed to be separated? Why is it that you have the female facility adjoining the medical center when you know the medical center is unisex, that both sexes have access to? That is the point.
No,
You really tell me there is no other place. There is
now.
no other place in, and those are all the things that I said. So you fixated on the fact that I asked, why is she there? But again, the question still remains, why is she there? Why isn't it that we have another place to put her? Why isn't there a halfway house or another place for children, a juvenile detention center for children? That's the question. So
I'm concurring with you there, but to me that should have been,
you chose not to.
Your argument that the government.
You chose not to get that. You see, because you're so fixated that the government. I'm asking the question because I'm a citizen just like you. I'm a citizen just like you, and I want to know, who do you think the question is towards? You think it's towards you, who is in no position to fix anything? The question is not towards you, but rather, why are we not clamoring for that? Why are we not clamoring for that? We clamor about everything else except for our children. We say the children are our future, and we say when something happens, we want to say, oh, this happened to a child, and da 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 da. But before it happens, why aren't we clamoring? This is not the first time. And I just gave the example of the 16-year-old who gave birth in prison, and yeah, she wasn't taken out of prison. She wasn't sent somewhere else. Nobody took the time to find out why is it that she kept running away or doing things at all the other places, And then you have a baby being born into that situation. Think about the psychological damage to the baby. The baby is born defective already, mentally. What was the follow-up? Do we know whatever happened to that 16-year-old? She must be, 20 now? Do we know what happened to her? Do we know what has happened to the baby? Do we know whether the baby was kept in her care? We don't know because, in St. Lucia, it's the hardest thing at the time that we talk about, and then 5 days later, we move on. Thank you so much for your contribution. But I do agree.
I'm agreeing with you. All I'm saying is, in the absence of a proper place, that is where we have.
That is where we have. I agree.
We have, and I'm saying
I
agree
agree
with you that there should have been a better place for them. But in the absence of that, that is what we have to determine. That's
no. But that's not.
Have to be kept at the time.
In the absence of that, it cannot be that she's kept in a place where men have access to. That's what I'm saying. Do you see the size of Bodley? Do you see the size of Bodley? So you're telling me that the only place available to keep a 16-year-old juvenile is in a place that is easily accessible by men?
No, I'm not sure if it was easily accessible because from what I'm hearing,
but direct,
the wall,
but
the
direct,
concrete wall,
uh-huh.
the concrete wall was, they had to force the entry through a concrete
I don't
wall.
even want to go. I didn't even want to go into that ridiculousness. That part is the most absurd of it. Thank you so much for calling. I really appreciate your call. But this is the most absurd, and I didn't even want to go into that. This is the most absurd part of it. That a concrete wall was broken to get access to this young lady. Seriously, nobody heard anything? We have another call online. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Laura.
Yep.
The issue really is this, that whatever or wherever the state has chosen to put this 16-year-old girl or any other inmate, it is the state's responsibility to make that place safe.
Absolutely.
Then there is the issue of the statements that were given when finally this got out, and they were contradictory. Nobody knows yet whether Mr. Herman was at the place when it happened. Nobody knows whether he was told something. Nobody knows whether he came when he had the press conference. Had he been adequately informed? Because you have to ask yourself a question: who came upon the rape? Who disturbed the rape? I mean, who? And nobody knows whether the girl was raped or not.
She was assaulted.
Well, they were asked about rape, because not all the reporters were dumb enough to follow on the vague "she was assaulted." Mr. Herman was actually asked, was the girl raped? He was also asked, were there any allegations by the girl that she was raped? And he said no. Okay? So there are a lot of question marks as to where was Mr. Herman when this thing occurred? Where were his people? How did it happen, and etc.? How did they come upon it? There's still a lot of questions unanswered on this matter. But finally, the matter of where you put people, that's a responsibility of the government, yes. It is also the responsibility of the government that wherever you put that person,
that they're protected.
You must guarantee them protection.
Absolutely.
And when it's not given, then the public needs to be informed as to why. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rick, for your contribution. As usual, very thought-provoking. But it's true. I mean, we just, not too long ago, and I keep saying that our memories are very short. We have another call online. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Yes, good night.
Good night.
I'm calling to let you know about juvenile.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying is, at this age group, a juvenile is what, at 14? 14 and up? Or 16?
No, at 16, you're still a juvenile. You can't, to my mind, you're a juvenile until the age of 18 because you can't vote. You don't even have access to your own body. Like you can't even consent to sex. So you're a juvenile.
But when you look at it, the age of consent is 16, isn't it?
Well,
so
I wish somebody who's better placed would call and rectify it, because I just got a message from somebody saying that the date of the age of consent has been raised to 18. I wasn't aware of that. I thought the age of consent was 16. But you were still a juvenile because you don't have access to your body, so you know.
All right.
So I'm a little confused on that one, and I must say that threw me off a loop. So I want to make sure that I'm giving off the right information here.
All right.
But I wish somebody who would be in the know, who would identify themselves and say how they know, would call and say, maybe a police officer or a counselor or somebody.
The other thing that I want to go to is when you look at before, when young men used to commit crimes, they used to send them to boys training centers. You remember that clearly, Massad boys. And where they used to send ladies, do they still have that?
Not that I know of.
Where are these institutions?
Sorry?
No, where are these institutions?
Well, that's a question to ask.
Now, another question I want to bring up is, in doing all of this, looking at Bodily Correctional Facility, this is to show St. Lucians when government are paying consultants in building projects, they need to have local individual subcontractors to see the job, how it's being done. Because no steel work in that jail, any partition should have steel into it.
That is why
Anybody can
I'm
burst through a
saying
block.
that this is the most absurd part of this whole saga. That you were able to break a wall to get access to a young lady. Now, you're breaking the wall, nobody's hearing anything, nobody's sounding an alarm. Like,
All right, yeah. But it's not just sounding an alarm only. Why is government paying wardens? If you watch America, every 40 minutes, 15 minutes, people are patrolling up and down in the jail. Why are they paying you for?
and that is one why when I said a little earlier that we have to look into the correctional officers that we say we have at Bodley, because I don't think these people are not even, I can't even say they're watchmen, because what they're watching for a young lady to have gotten raped and nobody saw anything, nobody heard anything.
You understand? They need more surveillance in there. So it means DEFCON fight, plenty people can die there.
And we don't know if plenty
Anyway.
people have died, eh?
You have a good night.
Thank you so much. Thank you for calling and for your contribution. But these are some valid questions that have been brought. And I didn't even want, like I said, I don't want to bring up the issue of the breaking the wall. Like, nobody heard. A concrete wall is not a piece of plywood. It's not chipboard or drywall. I mean, what is the wall made of for you to have to be able to break down that wall to get access to a young lady who is not supposed to be that accessible, because she's supposed to be more watched than anybody else, just by virtue of the fact that of her age. And you know, we have short memories. Have we forgotten what's this guy's name? The young Rasta man who was killed in his cell in Miku, Shaka Dan. Anyway, we'll come back to that. We have a call online. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Oh.
Thank you for calling.
Yes, can I speak to you now?
Sure.
What is taking place there, what happened there in Waterloo there, is I am not saying that the orders wasn't at work, but I'm trying to let you know that those people, those individuals that go to this young lady in that cell, the orders know very well what that took place. Because I'm trying to make the public know that all those people that is working there, even though they block the wall or they break the wall to go inside there, very well they had an order that know very well what that took place. And I know very well they know. So they're trying to hide it, and they know very well what happened. Thank you.
Thank you for calling and for sharing that. I mean, that's a speculation right there. But I have to wonder the same thing. I mean, how is it possible for three men, not one, not two, three men raped a young girl and nobody saw anything? But then it begs the question, as Rick asked earlier, who interrupted the rape? Or how is it that the rape was discovered? Who alerted the authorities of the rape? And why, if a young lady is being raped by three men, gang raped, why would she? I'm going to take that back, because it's not going to be a stretch to be a little confused after being gang raped. We have another call online. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Yeah, good evening, Laura.
Good evening. Can you turn down the volume of your television, please?
One of the things that I got to tell you.
Can you turn down the volume of your television,
Yes, I did
please?
that. I did that.
All right. Thank you. That's much
That
better.
young lady, I'm sorry for her. And I'm going to tell you, she's going to hate men for the rest of her life. Can you imagine she's in prison because of a man? And three men took advantage over that young girl. We all have children. And trust me, it would not be a nice thing if it had happened to my daughters. You know, because she already paying, are you there?
Yes, I'm listening to you.
She's already paying the penalty for her wrongdoing. You know? people to go into her cell and abuse that child like that. And I listened to some people on the air and saying that, you know, the evil, the man is following her, and the man that she killed or whatever. You know, I mean, people need to have a heart, man. You know, I'm sure she didn't go all out to kill the man. I'm sure of that child. If that child knew today, she would be in prison. If she could have reversed the time, she would have done that. You know, all of us in life make mistakes. You know, we all have closets. You know, and for a 15-year-old, or a 16-year-old child to be in prison right now and to be abused by men, you know, and for going inside there for a man, today, that child needs a lot of counseling. A lot of counseling, because she's going to hate men. You release her tomorrow, she's going to hit every man on this world. Trust me on that. Have a nice night.
Thank you for calling. Thank you for sharing your opinion. What I find very difficult to comprehend, though, is that some of the very same people who applauded Brandt Jean for forgiving Amber Geiger, and oh my gosh, the Christianity, the sheer compassion and empathy and compassion that it took for this young man to forgive Amber Geiger, where is that same compassion and empathy for this young woman? We have another call online. Thank you very much for calling. You're on the air.
Hi, Laura.
Hi.
According to the Minister for National Security, the wall was not an actual wall. I think it was some concrete blocks put together. And according to him, the guys were trying to escape and stumbled across the young woman. So that's some more food for thought.
I am laughing, but it's not funny. But the absurdity of it all is, you have a 16-year-old child in your custody, and you have her house in a place that is not even secure. You do not have wardens patrolling, making sure that she's safe. She's a ward of the state, of the country. You are not ensuring that she is safe, and you're telling me, oops. By the way, they weren't really looking for her to rape her. They were trying to escape and got her, and they say, oh, you know, why don't we just take a little 5-minute segue, rape her, and then move on to escaping? Who does that? I'm looking for my freedom. I'm going to stop to rape somebody first? That makes sense to you?
The saga continues.
I'm getting a bigger headache. Thank you so much for calling and sharing that. I'm going to have to call the minister for security and try to get a statement on that, because that is just so, wow, that's confounding. So I am looking for my freedom, and I'm going to stop and commit a crime while still incarcerated with the possibility of being caught. And okay, so be that as it may, are we saying now that these guys actually did us a community service by exposing the weaknesses of bodily? You have a young child, 16 years old, incarcerated at a correctional facility, not equipped for juvenile detention, in a cell that is not secure. Maybe they should have just kept her at custody suites. You think? You think? Wow. So anyway, as I was saying earlier, we had that experience of Shakadan, you know, being a ward of the state, being in a jail cell, found hung, and persons are saying or it was apparent suicide until the courts found that it wasn't. And that the onus was on the police officers at that station to ensure, whether it was suicide or otherwise, to ensure the safety of the inmate. He could have committed suicide, and he could have completed suicide. That was not the issue. The issue was, why was not he kept safe from even himself, if that were to have been the case? And so the same applies to the young lady the young girl, 16 years old, kept at bodily. Every extra effort should have been made to ensure, particularly if the wardens there knew that her cell was not secure. Every effort should have been made to ensure that she was safe. That which happened to her should not have happened to her. And all of those ensuing suppositions, I think sometimes we need to just stop. And as I said at the top of the hour, that it is okay to say, I don't know what happened, that an investigation is underway, and we will get back to you as soon as we know better. I'm not just saying that for platitude's sake, because we know that has been said, and nothing comes back, but actually follow up and come back to us and say, this is what happened. This is what we found happened. This is the shortcomings. This is how we're going to fix it. And that it is a sorry state for it to have happened, but this is what we're going to do moving forward. And this is how we're going to treat the perpetrators. And this is how we're going to, you can never compensate. So this is just using the word loosely, because you can never compensate a rape victim, whether they were incarcerated or otherwise, for rape. This is how we're going to compensate the young lady, or this is how we're going to fix any other juvenile coming into the system. We have another call online. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Hi, Laura. Good night.
Good night.
I kind of want to say I agree with what you're saying, because it's unfortunate that this situation happened, but we as people, especially the government, ought to learn from circumstances. A situation transpired in the past with this same 16-year-old or 17-year-old pregnant woman, and nothing was done to change that. Nothing was implemented to separate the prison, because there are people in there for different reasons, whether it be for murder, for theft,
for rape,
male, female. These people shouldn't be housed. Based on the magnitude of your crime, based on your gender, that is how the prison should be set up. So at no point in time should that situation have occurred, or should it ever occur again. And if something is to happen, the perpetrator should be prosecuted at the highest extent of the law.
Absolutely.
Because if it was my child, my heart goes out to her as somebody else's child. Much less if it was my child. We ought to put ourselves in the victim's shoes, in the parent's shoes. What you don't want for yourself, you cannot want for people.
Absolutely.
Forget about this is the government, whatever, or it's Herman's first thing, and that's not the issue. Right now, the issue is something bad happened, and we need to do something about what bad has occurred.
I agree completely, 100%. I don't have a problem with things happening, because things do happen. Life happens, and then you find yourself situations happening, but it should never have to reoccur. You learn from, and this is what I'm saying.
Exactly, that is how we learn. We learn from our mistakes.
Exactly, and what really gets me, caller? This is a correctional facility who cannot correct its own mistakes. How are you going to correct somebody's behavior if you cannot correct yours? You understand what I'm saying? You're doing something, and by Director Herman's own admission, policies and procedures are not in place, or that they were circumvented, or whatever the case might be. It should not happen. And we know these things happen time and time again. Why is it that they have to reoccur over and over and over? When will it end? Does it have to happen to Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so's son or daughter for us to finally wake up and do something about it? It just confounds me. It really, really does.
Because I am of the belief that in order to predict the future, we must study what happened in the past. We have to learn from our mistakes. Learn from our mistakes that happened. Learn from past mistakes. If we have noticed a trend and we fail to do something about it, or the government fails to do something about it, the government is to blame. Own up to your error and do something about it.
Absolutely.
As opposed to just always trying to cover up.
Absolutely.
The country can never grow if that is all we do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what it was even more striking? This on the heels of Productivity and Competitiveness Week. So we're focusing on the private sector, but we're not realizing that even in the public sector, there needs to be some level of productivity. There needs to be some. You have to be productive, and unfortunately, in a service sector, we always tend to think, how could you be more productive if you're already doing? You could increase the service that you provide. You can better the service that you provide. You train your correctional officers, because I don't think these are correctional officers. I think.
Yeah.
I don't even understand. I don't even know if a proper background check was made on some of these people. And maybe it was done in the beginning of the career, but what about a person who has served for 20 years and you're still at the same position, you're still at the same level? Maybe you have not even gotten additional training from what you got when you initially became a correctional officer. How is that investing in your resource? How do you expect there to not always be an incident of contrabands being brought in or more criminal activities happening there when your wardens, your watchers, your eyes and your ears cannot see or hear properly? Begs the question. But thank you so much for calling and for sharing. I loved your comments. I love your.
You too. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And that is what it is. I mean, we do these things. We come up with these fantastic programs. And year after year after year, we celebrate that and we want to underscore it. But where does it really start? Where does it really start? Does it start with the other guy that we really don't have much control over, or does it start with us? So if as a government we are celebrating those things, productivity, increased productivity and all of that, why can't government agencies start within themselves? Why can't they start within themselves and ensure that, you know what, when we talk about increased productivity, this is what we have been doing to ensure across the board that we are, doing whatever it needs to happen to increase our productivity. I seriously have a problem with some of the correctional officers that are at Bodley. I want to know, what is their training? And did the training end when they first became officers? Or is it an ongoing thing? And if it is, why aren't we hearing about those training exercises? We hear all the time about the police when the police has training and whatnot, but we hardly ever hear about the correctional officers at Bodley. And to my mind, they're just as essential as police officers. They're there to keep the criminals and the worst of us, the worst amongst us, away from the general population, which is those of us who are free to roam and to conduct our business. And even while they're in there, while those criminals, less than desirables are in there, these officers, their roles are even more critical because they have to keep them on the straight and narrow, rehabilitated, and to ensure that they're not committing crimes against each other. I mean, one of our earlier callers, gentlemen, said that this young girl is going to hit men for the rest of her life. Maybe she already hits men. That's why she found herself in a situation where she killed a young man. And the circumstances under which it was alleged that she killed the guy, killed the guy. I mean, we have to start trying to cut things at the pass. And even when the horses bolted and we have recoiled, and I know some of you are thinking, why isn't she going down the horse's track? We'll get down there sometime, not tonight because we're almost out of time, but we'll get down there. After we've recoiled, how do we ensure that behavior does not reoccur? Or how do we ensure that behavior, that propensity to go down that route is curbed, is fixed, is corrected? And the bigger question, why is it so? Why are we so eager to cover up everything, even when there's no need to cover up? We're covering up everything. You know, we're covering everything. We have our last call on the line. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Hi, Laura. Good night. Interesting program tonight, and you just asked the question that I was just about to raise. I find what happens in society today and what passes the media and our journalists today is that anybody in authority can just spin anything out of logic. In other words, just say anything. And I have heard I don't have a minister, but somebody said the minister said something, and Herman said one thing, and we just have a number of people trying to just spin things out, confuse us, and 2 days later, we are so confused and we just let things die. You know, I'm listening. I mean, it's pathetic what happens now. I listened to something tonight on the Owen King issue because you have a few outpatient clinics running and you have physiotherapy or whatever service they have at OKEU. It means OKEU is functional. And that is all we need in a medical...
Well, we do know that we got a failing grade from our benefactors. They only gave us a 2 out of 10.
And that I agree. But all I'm saying is that we as citizens, we are not demanding. And you spoke about productivity and you spoke about certain things. I mean, how do we let people get away with that? We have journalists in St. Lucia, and it's like anything anybody says, like we report it, and it dies there. Nobody is digging under the surface. I mean, I miss people like Rick Wayne, and it's unfortunate that Rick Wayne has just gone quiet, right? But we need the younger people, right? The younger journalists who would dig and who would go under the surface and pick up these things. I listened to a release by the government press officer this week on the whole horse racing issue. The press officer spoke about everything that is not and have not at least gone 1 inch in trying to educate citizens of St. Lucia what would happen. And you have things going on social media where the PM said something on Rick Wayne's show, and when he's taking on Ines Hila in the house and talking about, I mean, this is not, and saying something else. And these things just go by the way, and 2 days, 3 days later, everything dies out. Something is wrong in our society. Right? Something is wrong.
Thank you so much.
I agree with you when you speak about, and I think Rick spoke about that earlier on, it is the government responsibility if you are going to incarcerate me, if you are going to take me away from society and free life. You have an obligation to protect me. I have my rights even in prison.
Absolutely.
I have a right to be safe. Right? And when you tell me, I mean, things like a wall breaking down and fellas escaping, I mean, these are, why we let people get away with these things in St. Lucia?
I don't know. Maybe when you do get the answer, you let me know. And maybe when I do get the answer, I'll let you know, because I really don't know.
Well, I wish one day, I mean, I'm following up this Trump impeachment thing, and I'm seeing by St. Lucia.
We need people to be impeached.
We are just imitating everything that's happening in the U.S. I don't know.
Gosh. Thank you so much for calling. Thank you so much. You are our last caller. Thank you so much. And the caller touched on a number of things that I would have touched on if we hadn't gotten him. So thank you for that. But you know, I hope soon I'll be able to touch on the horse thing, and I hope that I will soon be able to touch on the inertia, I want to say, or the quietness. The silence is so deafening coming from the communications arm of the government, because it's like, you expect certain things. You expect better from some people because of their background. So you know they know better. So you come out and you tell me all what is not, but you don't tell me anything that is. You know what I'm saying? Whew. But anyway, we're all out of time. And I promise that sometime soon we'll be able to touch on a few of those issues that were identified. But in the meantime, I implore you to be vigilant, to ask the questions, and never stop asking the questions. You know, one of the things I always like to say is that we're proud to say that we are a Christian nation. We always say that. And one of the things Christians are supposed to do is to pray unceasingly. We're not supposed to stop praying. We're not supposed to say, oh, well, I asked for this, or I prayed for this, and it didn't happen, so forget about it. I want us to use that same ethos when it comes to demanding answers from our governments. And I say governments, successive governments have failed us in that regard. Ask questions without ceasing. Ask questions, demand answers. And even when we get the answers and the answers don't jive, the answers don't make any sense, keep asking follow-up questions. Let's stop being inert. Let's stop playing dead and just saying, oh, well, that's what you tell me. And so, I'm, you know, like a TGBA, mama GBA kabayo manger. Let's stop being like that, and let's open our eyes, open our ears, and let us use our tongues. Let's use our brains. Let us ask the questions. Let's decide for ourselves what makes sense and what doesn't make sense, and to follow up on what doesn't make sense, to acknowledge what makes sense, but at the same time, to question what doesn't make sense until it makes sense to us. Let's stop being spoon-fed. Know what I'm saying? Let's stop being spoon-fed. This is all the time that we have tonight, and you know, I've always tried to make this a platform where we can get your stories and make it our stories, and I hope, for our sake, that we don't let this down, that we don't let this die, that we don't let this young lady die. Yes, she committed a terrible act, and yes, she will be made to pay for it, but that does not mean that she deserves to be raped, to be gang raped in a government facility, in a state facility, where she has the right to be safe. And if you can't be safe where you have all of these guards, where can you be safe? Are we safe out there? Are we safe out where we are free to roam? Let's think about that. Before I leave, I just want to wish tout le monde Bonne Journée Créole, which is coming up on Monday. We celebrated on Sunday. Et tout ça ou fait, là ou ka boire, manger, là ou ka traverser ce chemin, ka monter, gozele ou be descend vieux fort, be descend choisir, point précaution, point ka yon a lot, et puis pas garder pour toi ka se ek pièce on. Until next week. Bye bye.